Okay everybody, today we have a deck tech over an expanded fighting deck that I have built, which utilizes the new versus ladder reward of Zygarde EX. Zygarde EX is an incredible fighter, having a massive HP pool and a pretty powerful and diverse set of attacks, allowing it to be a pretty good fighter and a very beefy fighter at that. So as is tradition with my deck techs, we're going to have the deck tech here in this video, and in a link down below in the card, and at the end of the video we're going to have a link to the gameplay video on this deck. So if you guys want to see a few matches with this deck, see how it plays and how it performs in matches, you can go check out that after this video. But if you guys want to see the full deck list and see me go over some of my decisions and card choices in this deck, you can watch this and then hop over and check out the gameplay after. So, with that being said, let's get into the Pokemon, let's cover the deck, and let's talk about it a little bit. So first up, let's start off with the Pokemon. This deck runs 7 basic Pokemon, all of them are basics, and 6 of them are EXs. This is a pretty traditional loadout for fighting decks, as Karina is broken. Our first off fighting Pokemon is a support Pokemon for this deck primarily. We have one baby Landorus. This Landorus allows us to get basic energy back from the discard pile and attach it for free to one of our benched Pokemon. It's 1 energy investment onto this Landorus for relatively low damage, but as a basic Pokemon with 120 HP, this is pretty good, being able to then, once he's rebuilt up one of our bench Pokemon for free, to switch him out with either Switch, Floatstone, or some other way to get him out of the active, is always good to be able to help us recover some of that lost energy as the game goes longer. We have 2 Landorus EX. Landorus EX is super powerful, being able to help us deal 60 damage on turn 1 for only 1 energy, and 30 of that going to the bench is incredibly powerful, allowing you to really easily snipe out benched Pokemon and many benched basics on turn 1 or 2. This can be incredibly devastating as an attack, especially if you're playing against an opponent that's planning to evolve a lot of his Pokemon. If you can snipe out some of those benched Pokemon early, you can really set them back significantly and make it very tough for many of these decks that rely on evolutions to win. Next we have Lucario. This is the other primary fighter in this deck besides Zygarde. Lucario and Zygarde share many of the same attributes and are very similar cards to each other. So let's cover Lucario. Lucario is a fighting type, 80 HP with a psychic weakness. Lucario has Missile Jab, which for 1 energy does 30 damage and is not affected by resistance. Notice that is only not affected by resistance. It does still care about weakness. So if your opponent does have a Pokemon that is weak to fighting, many of the normal types are, you will still be able to hit for that 60 damage, but it does not care if the opponent is resistant to fighting, and that's a very nice caveat to have. The second attack here on Lucario is Corkscrew Smash. Corkscrew Smash being able to, for 2 energy, deal 60 damage, so we've doubled our damage already, and you are now able to use this attack to draw up to 6 cards. And that's really, really powerful, being able to get that card advantage for really just playing the game as you would normally is always nice. Even if you're only drawing 1 or 2 cards a turn, this can just be super nice to help keep you a little bit ahead, help you dig a little bit deeper in the deck to try and find the answer you need if you really need it. And at the end here, we just have Somersault Kick, 3 energy for 100 damage. Sometimes you just gotta punch him in the face real hard. And the big hitter in the deck, Zygarde EX. 190 HP, fighting type Pokemon with a grass weakness. The grass weakness does hurt. Vileplume, Lurantis, Decidueye, all are relatively popular Pokemon, and unfortunately the grass weakness does hurt a little bit more than it has in the past and can outrun a lot of these grass decks, especially considering that many of them rely very heavily on evolutions, whereas Zygarde can come out of the gate hitting hard and fast turn 1. So your first attack here on Zygarde is Lance Pulse, dealing 20 damage base for 1 energy, and if there is a stadium in play, whether yours or your opponent does not matter, the attack does 20 extra damage. So simply for 1 energy, turn 1, you're dealing 40 damage, and that is great value. That is really good damage for your energy investment. And if there's a strong energy on there, if you've got a fighting stadium out, if you've got a choice band or a muscle band, you can easily be hitting for 60 to 80 damage on turn 1 for not that much investment, and that's a lot for any deck to deal with. Your second attack here is Cellstorm. Cellstorm for 2 energy deals 60 damage, and you heal Zygarde for 30 damage. This is really good to help the survivability and help to utilize that already giant HP pool on Zygarde. Throw a Fighting Fury Belt on Zygarde and start spamming Cellstorm, and Zygarde becomes an unstoppable monster of health, as well as putting out really good damage the entire time. And your final attack here on Zygarde is Lance Wrath, dealing for 3 energy, 100 damage. Sometimes you just gotta punch him in the face. And so that's the Pokemon in the deck. Notice all of them are fighting types, and all of them are basic Pokemon, as that is relevant as we move through the rest of the cards in the deck. Now quickly we're going to cover a lot of the item cards in the deck. A lot of these are one-ofs, and we're allowed to get away with running a lot of these one-ofs, as we do run a full set of Karina, and that will be relevant as we move through the rest of the deck tech. Running one big Masala, this is sort of a mini Pokemon Center Lady, healing for 20 damage, as well as removing a special condition from a Pokemon. This is really nice, being able to save a Pokemon that's been confused, or paralyzed, or slept, or whatever, especially in Expanded, when things like Hypnotoxic Laser are everywhere. Being able to have an out to that is always nice to have, as well as the pretty minor heal can be nice in pinch situations. Next we're running one Eco Arm. This is a deck that is running quite a few tool cards, and so having Eco Arm to help buy those back as the game goes later, where they've been discarded or made into the discard pile one way or another. We have one Enhanced Hammer to help deal with special energy heavy decks. The Double Dragon, Double Colorless, the single special colored energy are out there, and being able to deal with them is always nice. We have Field Blower. Being that this is an expanded deck, we have a lot of different options for being able to deal with tool cards and stadiums, and Field Blower's versatility has helped it earn the spot in this deck. We have two Nest Ball. Nest Ball is incredibly powerful for basic Pokemon-based decks like this, decks that are very heavy on the EXs. Nest Ball is amazing, as it just acts like Master Ball in this deck. We have one Professor's Letter to help tutor up energy when we need to in a pinch. And now we have the Ace Spec of choice. This deck's Ace Spec of choice I have chosen as Scoop Up Cyclone. I've chosen Scoop Up Cyclone over some of the other Ace Specs, namely Computer Search and Dowsing Machines. They're the most common other ones that you see. In that, Scoop Up Cyclone can help us get back all cards attached to the Pokemon, as well as returning the Pokemon itself. This deck is running no evolution Pokemon, so you don't have to worry about bouncing back a Pokemon and having to spend 2 turns re-evolving them again. And because most of the Pokemon in this deck don't need a lot of energy, they don't need a lot of investment to get very powerful, it only really will take maybe 1-2 turns tops to build back up a Pokemon that has been bounced back to your hand using Scoop Up Cyclone. You can also use Scoop Up Cyclones as a heal if you really need to, by bouncing a Pokemon and replaying it to remove any damage counters, status effects, anything like that on them. And Scoop Up Cyclone in a deck like this that is really heavy on the basic Pokemon, that's really heavy on high HP Pokemon, and is utilizing a lot of special energy and tool cards that you would rather not see go to the discard pile if possible. Being able to bounce them all back to your hand and then reallocate those items can always be very nice in this deck. So for me, I have chosen Scoop Up Cyclone as this deck's Ace Spec. Next up, we're running one Special Charge. This deck is running 4 strong energy, and being able to buy them back as the game goes later is always a good thing. We have one Super Rod. Pokemon die, things go to the discard pile one way or another. Being able to shuffle them back in to use later is always good if the game does end up going longer. We have one Switch here. Things need to get into the active, and as you've seen, this is a EX heavy deck, and a lot of these Pokemon have pretty demanding retreat cost, and having a few ways to get the Pokemon out of the active is always a good thing, because we don't want to be paying those retreat costs if ever possible. We have 4 VS Seeker. 4 VS Seeker because we're running supporters, and we want to be able to reuse them for free. We have 2 Fighting Stadiums. I think that you could run 3 Fighting Stadiums in this deck, but I definitely would not be running 4, as unfortunately due to the release of Sun and Moon, many EXs are seeing less and less play, and more GXs are seeing more and more play. And the split between EXs and GXs has made Fighting Stadium a lot worse than it has been in the past. And while it is still a powerful card, and in the right matchups, it can prove incredibly useful and valuable when it works, it just is not as good as it used to be to deserve the full playset of slots anymore. The other stadium that I'm running one Scorched Earth. This is nice for some card draw, especially later in the game. As I said, this is a deck that doesn't really need that many energies to get going, and so once you've got sort of 2, maybe 3 energy on 1 or 2 Pokemon, you can just start to discard the rest, as you're really not going to have a need for them later in the game. We have one Hex Maniac. None of our Pokemon at all have any abilities on them, and being able to turn off Shaman and Tapu Lele and many other powerful and dangerous abilities is always a good thing. We have 4 Karina, being able to tutor up any Pokemon that we need out of our deck, as all of our Pokemon are fighting types, as well as being able to tutor any item card we need is really good. And the consistency that Karina adds to this deck is what allows us to get away with running so many 1-ofs in this deck. As Karina allows us to tutor up for so many cards so efficiently, it really lets us get away with running cards and numbers that we would not be able to otherwise. Running 1 Lily. Lily is a pretty powerful card that allows us to get some pretty explosive and pretty ridiculous turn 1s. Being able to draw up to 8 cards after you've been already playing a whole bunch can be really tough to stop. It can lead to very explosive turn 1 and 2 plays, which is namely what this deck is trying to do. And while I haven't played as much with Lily as I would like to, I do feel relatively confident putting in the deck, as I think it can lead to really strong turn 1 or 2 plays without the downside of running a relatively weak Pokemon like Shaman in a deck like this. We have 1 Lysander. Being able to deal with Pokemon on the bench is always a good thing, whether it's a support Pokemon like Manaphy that's hiding on the bench, or just a Pokemon that is retreated out of harm's way. Next up we have In. The ability to shuffle anybody's hands away is always super powerful and never to be underestimated, and the nice card draw ability that it gives to us is always nice. Next up we have 1 Ninja Boy. As I've said, all of the Pokemon in this deck are basic Pokemon, and Ninja Boy sort of gives us access to all of them at the same time, allowing us to pick and choose from the basic Pokemon that we have in our deck, being able to find the right one for whatever situation we have, without needing to build them up on the bench first. We have Pokemon Center Lady. Pokemon Center Lady being able to remove all special conditions as well as healing a Pokemon is always great, and the fact that it's a supporter means it is reusable. Next up is Pokemon Ranger. This is one of the more odd cards that I'm running in this deck. Remove all effects of attacks on each player's Pokemon. This is very powerful, however, it does not see use very often. This is not a card that you're going to be playing every match. This is not a card you're going to be really utilizing every match. Pokemon Ranger is not a card that's usefulness comes up very often. However, in the matchups where it is relevant, it is game ending. Playing against I have played against Jolteons before, and Jolteon is just unbeatable for this deck if you do not have Pokemon Ranger. And Jolteon is an expensive card and has fallen a little bit out of favor with the release of Sun and Moon. However, it still does come up from time to time, and needing only 1 card out of your entire 60 to be able to deal with what would otherwise be an unwinnable matchup, I feel is a reasonable trade-off for me. Next up, we're running 1 Kukui. Professor Kukui allows us to draw some cards as well as deal a little bit of extra damage, which, as you've seen so far, just kind of generally is everything this deck wants and more. Running 4 Professor Sycamore, as it's amazing card draw, and discarding cards is not always the worst thing in a lot of decks. And for our final supporter, we're running 1 Team Flare Grunt, being able to slow our opponent down, stagger them a little bit, make them waste a turn, setting up some more energy can always be a nice thing. As I've said, this deck is trying to win pretty quickly. Just being able to stall your opponent, hold them back a little bit by removing some of their energy can always be very powerful. And now we move on to the tool cards. This deck does run quite a few tool cards, leading with 2 Choice Band. Choice Band is incredible, a nice upgrade on Silver Bangle, which is a card that unfortunately that could not run previously. Choice Band is the ability to be equipped to any Pokemon and can deal 30 damage to and allows you to do 30 extra damage to EX and GX Pokemon, allowing this deck to put out way more damage than would have been possible in the past. Next up, we have Fighting Fury Belt. Fighting Fury Belt giving us a lot more HP and allowing us to do a little bit more chip damage over time can be very nice. And as I said earlier, this allows us to turn our Zygarde into just a massive Pokemon that's very tough to deal with, hitting very hard and being such a huge tank. Next up, we have 1 Floatstone. As I've said, the retreat costs in this deck are pretty outrageous, and having an answer and having a diverse set of answers to be able to get a Pokemon out of the active if we really need to is always nice, and Floatstone is a nice option for us. And finally, the catch-all tool card of Muscle Band. Muscle Band allows us to do 20 damage to any Pokemon, not just EXs or GXs in the case of Choice Band. So if we're playing against a basic if we're playing against a deck that is not using EXs or GXs, which does happen from time to time, Muscle Band is just nice to help be able to get that extra damage in those situations. And finally, the energy. We are running 4 Strong Energy. and 7 basic fighting energy. So overall, that's the deck. Generally, it's a lot of 1-ofs, but you're allowed to get away with that because of Karina. This deck is running a little less Pokemon than I have run in previous builds of this deck. In the past, I would have been running multiple Ultra Balls as well as running 9 Pokemon. More often in the past, been running normally 1 extra copy of Zygarde and Lucario each. A combination of Nest Ball, Karina, and Ninja Boy allow this deck to find the right Pokemon it needs for the job at hand more often than not, and Karina's ability to tutor up item cards out of your deck allows this deck to run a lot of 1-of item cards in situations where it may not be able to otherwise, and 4 VS Seeker allow you to reuse a lot of the supporters in your deck that you would not be able to get away with running just 1-of otherwise. While this deck does run a lot of 1-ofs, and I know it is a lot of 1-ofs, and it can be a little bit sketchy, if you do feel the deck's consistency is in question, things like Lily, Super Rod, Eco Arm, Pokemon Ranger, these are cards that can be cut to add in an additional copy of a card here or there to help with consistency, to tweak it to your liking if you feel like you need those extra fighting stadiums, because you are fighting EX decks often enough. Then you can run that and you can change that up a little bit. I feel like this build of the deck helps to sort of show off the power of Karina and the fact that the deck doesn't need to run a whole bunch of 4-ofs in order to stay consistent and stay powerful. This is an explosive deck with a very high risk-reward factor to it. You can get massive turn 1 and 2s and really powerful and dangerous turn 1 and 2 kills, but you do lack some consistency from time to time, and you do get screwed by maybe a powerful card that you need isn't prize carded. It happens sometimes. I think the consistency that the card draw and card filtering this deck gives you is enough to allow you to get away with running some odd card choices that you would not be able to otherwise. Okay guys, with the tech out of the way, what do you guys think of the deck? What card choices do you think were a little bit weird? What cards would you maybe change out? What cards would you bump up or down in the deck? Let me know what you guys think. This deck, I think, is relatively easy to build overall with This deck, I think, is relatively easy to build overall with both Zygarde and Landorus coming from Versus ladders pretty recently. Makes this deck pretty easy to build for a lot of players, even truly free-to-play players. I think this deck is obtainable, and I think that this is a pretty fun and relatively competitive deck in Expanded, capable of some really crazy turn 1 or 2 kills. I think this is a pretty fun deck, and I look forward to trying it out a little bit more over the next day or so. But with that being said, thank you all for coming. Hope you all had a great day. I'll see you all next time. Thank you for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoy this content and want to see more from me, please feel free to subscribe. If you guys want to leave a like, comment, anything like that, please do that all below. And, as always, this content is brought to you by your kind support over at Patreon. Thank you.